So today I'm joined by one of my good friends, Troy Brown, and known Troy for several years and just love his family. Got to know them as their pastor, and actually got to see Troy in action a little bit at a house one time, and during his deputy duties. And a little hairy. I was glad to see him when he walked in because I was out of my element. But Troy, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So Troy, and I tell you, you work for the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department.
Correct.
And Nick Weldon is the sheriff down there, and you guys are doing a good job here in the county trying to keep everybody safe. And you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you went to school at, and
All right. So I went to Plainview. Then I went to I went to the military, and after the military,
what branch did you serve in?
Army.
Okay.
I was in the Army, and then I was in the Army for 2 years, active duty in the mid '80s, and then in the late '80s, early '90s, I was in the National Guard. Then my wife and I married, and I went back to school, went to Northeast, and then I went on to UAH and got a degree in accounting and started worked in accounting for many years, and got interested in law enforcement. And a friend of mine helped me get on the reserve unit, and a couple of years later, I went to police academy, got certified. I got certified in 2010. Been working in law enforcement. I stayed at the sheriff's office for several years. Then I went to Sylvania for a few years and came back to the sheriff's office. And now I'm working in the investigative, major crimes investigation unit, and primarily financial fraud.
Okay, so you've got two big careers. Most people just get one, but we got a CPA career. And how many years did you just do CPA work?
So I did really corporate accounting. I never got my CPA certification. I have a degree in accounting, but I don't have CPA certification. But I'd worked in that for 27 years, and in about 13 of those years, I was also involved in law enforcement. So a lot of that time I was accountant by day, police officer by night.
Okay, so you're kind of like a superhero. You're just kind of unassuming during the day, and then like bad dude at night, taking care of saving people.
Maybe not too smart. That's probably
well. That's a lot of work. I mean, that's it takes a lot. One career is more than most people can handle. That's two careers. That's a lot. So, must have had a pretty good wife at home that was very understanding.
Yes, very good. She's been very supportive, and that's, you bring up a good point. That does not always happen. I mean, law enforcement is not an easy career on family. You work nights, you work holidays. This past year was the 5th year in a row that I worked Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. You work your anniversary, you work Valentine's Day, so it's not easy, but yes, my wife has been 100% supportive the whole time. I don't remember a time that she ever complained of, you're not at home.
Yeah, you pretty much have to have that if you're going to have a career in law enforcement, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like pastoring. You're not just really off. You're always on call, or you got something sometimes there's always times where you're like, man, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather be on vacation or whatever. But law enforcement, I believe, is about like pastoring. It's a calling, because if you ain't called to do it, you're not going to last very long.
Absolutely. And, I've had people ask me why I do it, and I honestly couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, I do not have a reason. It was something I was interested in. It's very interesting, and then you see a lot of things that you can't unsee. You see a lot of things you wish you hadn't seen. You see broken families, broken people, and stuff that's, but the thing about it is you have to do your job. When you see something that's terrible and something that shouldn't have happened, you still have to be a professional and focus on what it is that you have to do, and not, be emotionally involved or upset at what you're seeing.
Yeah.
You have to get upset later.
That's one thing that I have noticed, and I think this is probably a difficult thing, but you as a law enforcement officer, and anybody that's in law enforcement, they have to learn how to compartmentalize things. And sometimes that causes some problems if you don't have good counseling and you don't have good people to talk to, because you can in essence, cut your feelings off. And I've seen that happen with people where they just, husbands that are in law enforcement, or like maybe even firefighters, are coming up on traumatic scenes and stuff like that. And that's how our body, our mind copes with trauma, is we try to just desensitize to it. And then when you go home, it's hard to cut those things on and off. And
Absolutely.
if you don't have a good wife there that's kind of helping you with that, you'll get in trouble.
Well, and two, a lot of times, sometimes it takes its toll, over a long period of time. I was a chief of police for one of the local departments for a few years, and really for about a year. I worked at that department for a few years, but I went to the Chiefs conference, and one of the things that, it was like classes and whatever. And one of the things the guy told us is that the average life expectancy of a police officer is age 57, which was, kind of is not great. And then one of the things he said that, after you do this for 30 years, his actual words were, you will be amazed at how screwed up you are.
Sure.
And because, what they say that most people will have about 3 to 5 very traumatic life events in their entire life. As a police officer over a long term, you'll have 500 to 800.
Mm.
And so I think the compilation sometimes is what, gets to people.
What I brought you in here today to talk about something I was telling you just a few minutes ago, something I never thought I'd be doing in a podcast on romance scams, love scams, any kind of scams that are going on. And so you're a part of the DeKalb Sheriff's Department, and one of your responsibilities is doing investigations. And so tell us kind of what your job description is and what you are tasked with doing right now.
So by and large, the cases that I get are financial fraud. Now, all the investigators, we're on call for a week at a time, and we rotate and whatever. So the week that I'm on call, whatever that I get called out to is actually my case. So it could be a sex crime, it could be a violent crime, it could be property crimes or whatever. But by and large, so what happens every day is that the deputies go out, the deputies in the local police departments say, we, the sheriff's office, we investigate felonies for not only out in the county, but for the municipalities that don't have their own investigators.
Okay.
So we have ours. Rainsville has investigators. Fort Payne has investigators. And we, the sheriff's office, pretty much work all the other felonies. So deputies and police officers will, because everything starts with a police report.
Okay.
So deputies and police officers will go out and do a report, and every morning our administrator will, pull the reports that are felonies and will assign those out. And so, we've got 2 people that do sex crimes. I do financial fraud. And then we have 4 other people who do, property crimes and violent crimes. And so what she does is she will assign those cases to whichever is the appropriate one. So any morning that somebody, there's a financial crime, then that automatically comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just kind of take it from there.
So how long have you been doing this job that you're in now there at the Sheriff's Department?
So doing the investigations, just 4 months, I kind of got the job because of my background and because, one of our guys is retiring and he was the one that did financial crimes. And, the one that did it before him is somebody, I won't call his name, but he's somebody that and that I know and that I respect. And I'm sure you do too. It's a great guy. Mm-hmm. And so that's the nice thing is I've got a lot of, support because I can always, lean on these people and these other departments too. I've called some of the guys in these other departments. We work together on some things, but I've been doing the financial crimes for about 4 months, and in 4 months, it's been very eye opening.
Sure. So I guess, when you're out on patrol, you never know what you're going to get. I'm sure it's the same way with this. Once you start digging into investigations and stuff, there's probably been some things you've been like, wow, that's something new or I've never even thought about.
Right. Yeah.
People get creative when it comes to stealing.
Oh, with scams, they're professionals. A lot of them are professionals. Some are not. I mean, you get some joker that just, steals a credit card and uses it or something like that. But a lot of the scams that we're seeing, right here in DeKalb County are scams that, start overseas, that's the tough part. I mean, if the offender is not in this country, we really don't have any legal jurisdiction, to go to Nigeria or to India or Jamaica or where a lot of these places are. And a lot of people, I didn't know it really until a few months ago that, a lot of these countries, they have actually scam call centers, just like, you call in for your bank or whatever company you're, Amazon or whatever, and you you get plugged into a call center. They actually have call centers where that's what their job is all the time.
Yeah, I just got scammed like a week ago. I ordered, which I don't know if you call it a scam or not. It's scam to me because it's my money, you know. I'd ordered something off of, I don't know, off the internet or something. And so anyway, these people showed it was coming from Hong Kong, and it was one of these cool reels, water reels. You know, it was a great deal. And I thought I bought one. So anyway, I've been waiting. And finally it said it was delivered. And it showed a picture, and it was a picture from like 2 years ago where something was dropped off. So somehow they had hacked a FedEx account and had a fake looking FedEx icon. And I was like, but luckily I bought it through PayPal, so they just refunded my money. So it can happen to anybody. And so, you know, we got some things we're going to go over here, just kind of some local scams that kind of you've encountered and seen, stuff like that. And what are some local things you've kind of seen in your job that you've been doing with people?
So local ones, what you see, it's very common. We've had this happen before where people will call and say that, I mean, they've even actually, somebody even told me they used my name one time, but I don't know if that's true or not, but we know that they've used, you know, my predecessor and my mentor, they've used his name, called and said, I am, and I'm not going to call his name, but, you know, they tell them that, you know, they have a warrant, and if they'll go ahead and pay it off, then we wouldn't come out and pick them up. And, you know, the number looks like it's from DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. I mean,
Oh, wow.
because they can spoof numbers. It's you know, some of the other local scams, you know, we have, and I've actually had this happen in my family, you know, is that, you know, they would, this is an older one, but they would actually hack into your computer, use your computer's camera, take a photo of you, and then accuse you of being involved in, you know, some kind of child porn or whatever. And then, you know, if you'll pay this fine, then we'll let you out of it, which is ridiculous. And another one, and we've seen this one. I actually got something in the mail from one of the cities. It's a suburb of Phoenix. It's a bail bonding scam, and it was happened around here, from my understanding too. But they will call. The interesting thing about this one is, you know, I read the report. What they found out in this one, it was somebody calls and says that they're a bail bondsman and that their family or loved one is in jail, and they can, you know, go ahead and pay their bond and send it to them by Venmo or some other cash app, and they would and you know that they'll make bond. And then they did that, and then, you know, they're calling, oh, he was also charged with this. Well, they're also going to put an ankle monitor on him, and so they will keep coming back. These scammers will keep coming back as long as you send them money. And so what happened on that one was that agency did some legwork, and they must have issued subpoenas or whatever, and they found out that Venmo account was registered to somebody here in DeKalb County. So they just sent us the entire case and said, oh, this didn't occur in Arizona, which it actually occurred in both. And, you know, I ended up trying to contact the victim multiple times, you know, email, phone calls. They never responded to me. So, but what the interesting thing was is, this person that their loved one that they said was in jail was actually in jail.
Okay.
So they must have had some kind of,
So they had logged on probably to the sheriff's website and seen what the inmates were.
and because that wasn't even in DeKalb County. This the lady was the victim was in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Her loved one was in Florida, but he had actually been arrested, but somebody else had bonded him out.
Wow.
So, you know, and, you know, a lot of times that's the one thing also to be looking out for is it's, you know, the sense of urgency, you know, so you've got to do this right now, or, you know, whatever. But another one that we've been seeing around here is, you know, contract work. You know, somebody will come up and, you know, and say, hey, if you need siding on your house or you need a new roof, and they'll come up and they'll go, hey, you know, I've got to have some money and whatever. And then they just won't do the job. And that's very common. That's a tough one as far as law enforcement is concerned, because a lot of times, you know, that's almost like a civil matter instead of a criminal matter, because you contract somebody to do your roof, they got it about halfway finished. I mean, I had this happen to me several years ago. I don't know if you remember, we had a hailstorm about 2010, damaged my siding, so we had to get new vinyl siding. And the guy came out. He'd come out and work about 2 hours. He got in the middle of so many jobs. He'd come out and work a couple of hours. Took him 5 weeks to do about a 3 or 4 day job.
Oh, wow.
You know, and so a lot of times people get tired of waiting, and then, and whatever. So, and at the end of the day, you've got a contractual agreement between two people, and it may or may not be criminal. So that
Well,
makes
I had somebody tell me one time, of course, this when I was in Indiana for a while, guy was talking about that he owned a business, and he said basically, if the person didn't want to pay, they didn't have to pay you. They just, you can take them to court, but he said most of these people are not going to go to court. He said, because they're just looking at, I'm going to be spending more money. And so they just don't want to do that. And
that's the problem with civil matter too. I mean, because sometimes you can sue somebody and you can get a judgment against them. Getting them to pay is a whole other story.
yeah, well, a lot of times they'll file a lien against their property, but I mean, if they ain't never planning on leaving their property, that ain't gonna do no good. They just gonna sit there with a thing there. So as far as the things like, people calling saying, hey, you got a judgment, for some of these people that's maybe had some things like some real legal stuff, that's probably a very, scary thing. And they're like, hey, I better take care of this quick because I definitely want to go back.
Absolutely. Or it's believable, but they may think it's a mistake or whatever they happen. And somebody, even some citizen that's never been in any trouble, and you call them, hey, you've got a warrant, and they're like, oh my gosh, what could this all be about? Well, you go ahead and pay and they're, it's like, oh, let's just make this go away or what is so, the scammers is what you and I talked about before we went on air is the scammers, the thing that they will do generally is they will try to find your vulnerability, whatever that is, and they'll exploit that. And that's essential.
I mean, I get it, man. If I'm ever somewhere and them blue lights go on, I'm like, I gotta pull over right now, and I'm thinking, well, I need to get on up the road here. But then my brain's like, you better pull over right now. They're fixing to get you. So it's like, law enforcement is kind of like, it's like, you don't just mess around, you do what you're supposed to do, so I certainly get the, hey, I better do this. But that's the thing. And then so what's some other scams that you've seen kind of since you've been doing this?
So when I was on patrol, I had this one happen. I did reports on this one several times. It was a grant, So what happened was that somebody would, an offender would contact the victim via Facebook Messenger, and it would be from one of their Facebook friends, be from somebody that they know, and say, hey, I saw your name on a list. It's usually an older person. I saw your name on a list to get a government grant, and they think this is somebody they know, somebody they trust, somebody, it's a cousin or it's somebody, they haven't seen in a little while. And so what they'll do is they'll say, and tell them how to call, who to contact. So they'll contact them and they'll go, yeah, you're actually getting this grant for $50,000. A grant, you never have to pay it back. So, all you got to do is pay a processing fee. And what they'll do is they'll send them to a dollar store and get them to buy gift cards. And that's a very common method of payment for these scams. It's gift cards. They'll get you to get a gift card, and then they'll get you to take a photograph of the gift card and send it to them. And once you send them that, they spend it, and that money's gone, and you will never get it back. And it's very untraceable. And so then what they will do is they'll come back to you and say, well, you got to pay the taxes on this. Well, we have to have an armed guard. They will keep coming back as long as you'll keep sending them money. I mean, one of these scams, I know somebody that was scammed out of tens of thousands of dollars in this very manner. And then I went to one, it's a couple of years ago, right around Christmas when I was on patrol. And this was an older gentleman that didn't have a lot of money, borrowed some of the money to do this. He was scammed out of about $700, but it was right around Christmas time. And it was $700 that he didn't have. And it was the same exact thing. And then I had one, same thing. I was on patrol and somebody called me. It was, when I was on patrol, we worked 4 days on and we worked 12-hour shifts. So those were long days. And it was day 4, I was going to be off the next day. And it was about 5:30 in the afternoon. I was at the office turning in paperwork and I get a call. And so I called the person back, and he was an older gentleman, and his wife, he believed, was being scammed. It was exactly this scam, and they were in Ider. And so I drove, all the way from the office to Ider to try to talk her out of doing this. And when I got there, she was locked in the bathroom. She wouldn't come out. She was yelling at me. She wasn't being very nice. And I started telling her exactly how the whole thing worked. And she finally actually walked out of the bathroom and started listening to me because I described to her, without having talked to her, exactly what was going on. And she said, well, I'm still going to send them $100, and if they scam me, then, and so I don't know what happened after that, but that's actually a pretty common one. We have Facebook Marketplace. We have somebody here in DeKalb County that bought something off Facebook Marketplace, and what happened is it was a piece of equipment. It was rented in another state and promptly put on marketplace. He bought it. They delivered it. And a couple of weeks later, because it was rented somewhere, they had a tracker on it, and they just contracted a repo company. A repo company just showed up and says, "Hey, we're here to get our piece of equipment. It was stolen."
Oh, wow.
And so essentially this occurred in another state. And, I've actually contacted, the investigators in the other state, and, their victim got their piece of equipment back. So they were pretty satisfied, but we still have a victim here in DeKalb County that was out, many thousands of dollars.
Well, and that's the thing. It's just on this Facebook marketplace thing. I almost got scammed not long ago until I was looking for this. It's called a dry sauna. It's like basically a sweat box.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're pretty pricey. You can probably get a cheap one for about $1,200. Well, I've been looking for a long time on Marketplace for one. And so there's some started popping up. I thought $600, that's pretty great. So I just went out, I even messaged these people, and I noticed every one of them eventually would say, I got a lot of people messaging me about this. Can you put the deposit down and I'll hold it for you? Which makes sense. You're like, okay, well, yeah, I get that. I've sold stuff on Marketplace and people not show up and stuff like that. So there's something in my gut is just saying, nah, I'm not going to do that. And so, but anyway, what I got to finding was I thought there's got to be a common theme here, because most crimes, there's a common theme of how it's done. But I got to looking, and what I found is, and I'm saying this because somebody might be needing to hear this, if you find something on there, you've heard the say it's too good to be true. Number one, it probably is. Number two is what I found with those things, all those sauna things that I was hunting that was crazy priced. If you go down, you look, the people selling them, every one of their Facebook pages were started 2025.
Yes.
So you start saying what it is. They just created a Facebook page to put this on Marketplace.
Absolutely.
And so if anybody's listening to this, and if you think you're getting a good deal, look down to the thing and say, if it says 2025 or the month where it was open the month you're doing that, then it's a scam. And then don't ever, if somebody's really want to sell something, don't ever pay them over the phone. Go to them and take the money.
Yep. That's precisely what happened on the one I was just telling you about this piece of equipment. The person who was supposedly communicating with him, he had a Facebook page. He just had himself and no Facebook friends and no posts, no anything. I mean, I issued subpoenas, and, it came back to, that's one of the things. It came back to some stuff, you get an email account and we can issue subpoenas and try to get back to the actual person through the email account. Or sometimes that's the thing with financial fraud, is that a lot of times you start out with one little piece of information, and then you have to issue a subpoena to get some information about that, to get another piece of information, and it's a waiting game. And some companies are not super friendly to law enforcement, and so it's tough. And then a lot of times what you end up finding is that when you get some piece of information, you figure out that this is occurring in we get IP address, we try to look for IP addresses and get locations. And a lot of times they're using VPNs, which is very difficult to get to the end of where a VPN, where it's located at, who's the actual subscriber. Or when you find a location, or you'll look at the VPN company and it'll be in the Netherlands or it'll be in Nigeria. And then, it may have a phone number, and then the first three numbers are a country code, and you look up that country code and it's out of Nigeria. And at that point, you're there.
I think that's one of the largest places I read somewhere about where a lot of this is coming from.
Absolutely.
So one time I was looking for like a little mini tractor to just do some little bush hogging stuff around here. So I found this amazing deal with Kubota. And this guy, it was this auction company that was selling them, and they had all this stuff. Well, anyway, when you start running it down, the address was to like a Burke's or something like that store. So what they were doing is they were getting the money, and they were even like charging them extra for like delivery fee. And there's like, well, we'll knock that off if you'll come get it. And so they give them a fake address, and they don't give it to them until they give them the money. And then but when somebody's looking for a good deal, there's almost like and I get this, there's like a thrill in getting a deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you start missing red flags, and our emotions are powerful. People don't realize how powerful your emotions are, and they will lie to ourselves, but our emotions will actually lead us down the wrong path. And I think that's why the Bible says that our hearts are wicked and deceitful, and we're not to trust our hearts, because our hearts can deceive us and lead us down the wrong path.
Oh, 100%.
And we're supposed to be wise and do those kinds of things. So, what's some other things? I know we were talking about here, the Cash App stuff, and have you seen Bitcoin type pays? And
The Bitcoin if they don't get you to buy cards, what they will do is they'll get you to use Bitcoin. And I'll back up just a little bit, because one of the things you bring up about them wanting a deposit. So we had this one happen right here in DeKalb County too. Was that somebody put on Marketplace? They put an apartment for rent, and this was it's out in the rural area, but somebody had built an apartment. It was like looked like a house almost. What it was 3 apartments. And they were brand new. And so you had a young couple that wanted to rent it, and they found it on Marketplace. And so they contacted the person, and, they were like, yeah, I'll show it to you. But I'm going to go ahead and get your deposit on it. I mean, we got people wanting this. I mean, this is a young couple. It was their chance to live in a brand new apartment. I don't know what they were living in, but it probably was, because I actually went to it and saw it, and they were very nice. And, so that they play on your emotions, just like you said. And so they got them to put a deposit down. And they said, okay, well, they was like, well, I need you to pay the first month's rent, $850. So they put down, $500, and then they put down $850. And then it was we want that. They haven't even got to see it yet. Then they wanted to put down their last month's rent. And that's finally kind of where they stopped. So I went out there to the actual location where the apartment was, knocked on the door. And, I was wearing what I'm wearing today. I've got a, sheriff's office shirt with a badge, and I'm not in, full uniform like a patrol officer, and I'm not in a marked vehicle. And there was a younger woman that was like, I don't know if I should open the door. And I kind of get that. I'm just like, hey, I'm with the sheriff's office, and I stepped back and, because she finally opened the door and I talked to her. She told me who actually owned the building. I called and talked to him. And they weren't renting it for $850. They were renting it for $1,150, which is crazy high to me. It seems like, I mean, maybe I'm just older and whatever, but he had advertised those apartments on apartments.com and Zillow, and the scammer obviously went on apartments.com and Zillow and got the photos and whatever and put it on Marketplace. And the person that was actually living there that I talked to, they had seen it on Marketplace and were communicating with them first, and they just happened to go through Zillow, and they actually talked to the owner. So that's what they'll do. Is say they just kept coming back. Well, I'm gonna, give me your deposit. Okay, give me the first month's rent. Well, give me the last month's rent. And I mean, like I say, they will come back. Keep coming back.
Well, that's the thing. Any career if somebody has, it don't matter what if it's a doctor, a dentist, welder. Some people, they excel in their career and what they do. Same way with scammers. Absolutely. There's good ones and there are bad ones. And if they're going to make money, they're going to be good at it. And I had a guy tell me one time, he said, talking about going and buying a car on the car lot. And he said, you think you're going to go down there and you're going to be a good haggler and you're going to get a deal. He said, they do that every day, all day long. You're unmatched for that.
Yes.
And there's good car lots and good car salesmen and stuff like that. But, and it's not just, the danger is not just losing your money. I mean, there's a physical danger here, because it wasn't long ago, there was somebody out, I don't know if they were locally here or something, that went to see something on Marketplace or something. I don't know if it was to buy a car or something, and they were shot and killed and robbed. And so it's not just a matter of, so if somebody was going to buy something on Marketplace or something like that, what would be some things you would recommend to them that's kind of, nothing's 100% safe, but some things that you think would make it a safer situation?
I think you brought up the best point is, do not pay them anything until you see it. I mean, and also, just like you said, your emotions. In other words, if this is a good deal, or this is a tractor, or this is whatever that you really, really want, and and they say, well, somebody's already bought it or whatever, you just have to go, oh well, but and then you want to try to meet in a public place, and and I bought things off Marketplace and I've sold things off Marketplace. And, I've got a truck in my garage right now. It's an older classic, pretty much classic. It's 50 some years old, whatever, but bought it from this old guy in Cleveland, Georgia, and, gave me the right. This was off of Craigslist in the Craigslist days. It was only 8 years ago. That's going way back. It was like 10 years ago, but I bought it. But, he gave me directions to his house and I turned down this dirt road. And
Was he on MySpace also?
I was not, no. But when we drove down the dirt road, I told my wife, I said, well, I wonder if this is the part where we get killed, but
You've probably seen it. There's this funny meme on Facebook, and it's this guy, it's like standing at like a crossing of a dirt road holding these pillows. He says, just sitting here waiting to give these pillows to whoever my wife sold this to and risking my life.
yes. Well, it turned out he was a really cool guy, and everything, and it all worked. But that's what, I mean, just be very careful of where you go and you don't want to. And another thing that makes the whole thing risky is that, if you're going to buy a tractor and it's $5,000 or $10,000, I mean, they're probably going to want cash and you can't blame them, so then, so you're going somewhere with $10,000 worth of cash in your pocket. That's not super safe. So, there's, everything has risk. I think you try to minimize those risks as much as you can. Maybe you do arrange to pay them through a cash app after you've seen it, after you've taken possession of it and you've met them in a public place.
Sure. Well, and that's the thing. And so one thing here, we're going to talk about is something everybody loves is that's the federal government. Everybody's familiar with taxes and stuff like that. They don't have to get in a hurry sending you your refund, but you better get on the deadline when it's time to send yours in.
Yes.
And so anything dealing with the government, people get real nervous and stuff like that. So, one thing we're talking about here is Social Security scams.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen kind of with that? Is it, I mean, I guess basically these are all the things, same thing. They got to get your information and then they're going to use it.
Yes.
And so what have you kind of seen with the Social Security thing? Because older folks, man, you start talking about Social Security, they get real nervous and you can pretty much have your way with them when you start talking about Social Security stuff.
Right. So when somebody gets your Social Security number, they essentially have your identification. They have your ID. They can do, many different things with your ID. But, one of the things that we see is if people will compromise your Social Security number, a lot of times they will file income taxes in your name, get a refund, and then when you go try to file, you can't file. I actually have one of those on my desk right now. Yeah.
Well, that guy kicked in the face.
It was
me and Baby's got money savings coming in. We're gonna get this, and you're like, you ain't getting nothing.
Yeah. So there's this guy, I get a case. He's younger guy, works somewhere or whatever, and he's like, I got a W-2 from such and such water board over in East Coleman County or something like that. And I'm like, okay. So I called them, and the lady I talked to, she was like, you're the fourth person that's called. So they've had somebody was using them, for an employer. And cause, they said that the guy made like $68,000 that year, which was way more than he actually made. But so he couldn't file his income taxes because somebody had already done that.
Wow.
And so
how do you undo something like that?
Yeah, they just have to get with the Social Security Administration. But I'll tell you one that's actually even this one didn't turn out to be a crime, but it was also very, it's interesting and it's certainly coincidental. So we had an immigrant here in DeKalb County, and she's very, very nice person. And so I went out there, or the deputy took the report, and basically what she was saying was that somebody had opened an account in her name, and then they had also taken out a student loan in her name, which is again something that we see sometimes too. And so got out there and talked to her, got the information, and while I was with her, I called the bank. It was one of the banks in Albertville. I called and said, well, can we get an accounting from? I can get an accounting from account detail for this person by issuing a subpoena. But if it's Paul Loan scam, somebody scams you and they skim your debit card, the first thing I'm probably going to do is come to you and go, hey, can you get me, go to your bank and get me an account detail? Because that's many times faster than what I would get it if I issued a subpoena. So we called the bank, and I was like, can she get an account detail and the details on the account, try to get the details on who opened this account and why. And they're like, no, we can't give that to you. But it's in her name, It's in her social security number, and you're telling me that you can't give her the details on an account that's supposedly hers? Nope, we can't. Okay. I didn't like that. I was
See,
uncertain.
what's their reasoning for that?
They knew that she wasn't the one that opened it. I think they could have done it. I mean, me personally, I know I'm not an attorney, but I think they could have done it, but I think they were afraid they would give out somebody else's information.
Get sued.
Yeah. And so I did issue a subpoena for it, no problem. And then a couple of days later, she called me and says, well, I got some stuff to tell you about this case. Um, can you come out here? I can tell you over the phone, but it'd be easier if you come out here. It was, way it's almost out of the county. And so I went back out there, and she said, somebody called me and said that she was the uncle of, and it have her first and last name. I'm like, okay, that's different. And so essentially what happened, they were both immigrants, and both of them had gotten Social Security. What did else? It was two people that had the same first name, the first two letters of their middle name, and had the same last name. Their date of birth was one day different. And the Social Security Administration issued both of them the exact same Social Security number. So essentially, there was one of them lived in Maryland, one lived here in Alabama. The one in Maryland had opened an account and had student loans, and then there was something showed up on there, and one of them went to one credit bureau to report it as fraudulent. Another one went to a different credit bureau, and one of them wouldn't give it to them. They said this has already been reported. But anyway, it was two different, because we actually called her on the phone, so I talked to both people with the same, but both of them just very sweet personalities, just very nice young ladies. And neither of them knew that the Social Security Administration had issued them, because both of them got their Social Security number. One of them got it in 23, and one of them got theirs in 24. But it was just
That's got to be even more complicated and difficult for the immigrant community, because they're already not very, trusting of law enforcement. So, and this is what we have found a lot of times with like abuse cases with kids and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They won't report nothing because they're afraid that it's going to create bigger problems for them than what's actually just being reported. And so they're an easy target for a lot of these folks and scammers.
Well, you bring up a good point too. I actually wrote some notes on here. From what I've read about scams, is about 85% of them go unreported to police. And there's, according to our district attorney, she put up Summer Summerford. She's put something on the district attorney's Facebook page. She did a little video. Y'all can look it up, where he said that they estimate that $100 million a year gets scammed out of Alabamians.
Wow.
And so for me, I mean, I hadn't really counted up the dollar figure of scams that I've worked in the last 3 or 4 months, but it's well over 100,000. If you extrapolate that out over the course of the year, and then you divide it by the 15%, there's probably over $2 million, $2.5 million in DeKalb County that people are getting scammed out of every year.
Gosh.
And that's crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, some of these people, this is what they depend on to survive.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the thing. And that kind of, that brings us kind of to our subject here of like romance scams and love scams. We were just talking just a minute ago about, the power of emotions, and I don't know that there's a greater power than the power of love. And so you take somebody that's maybe a retiree or something like that, or maybe they're older, and so they start getting these messages and they start saying the right things to them. And man, and they hadn't heard that in a long time, or they're in grieving or whatever. And I was watching something not long ago, and it was talking about, it was like some reporting on scams and stuff like that. But it was talking about these people that are doing this, they have a actual manual that they've got, what to say and when to say it. And like one of them was like, they always call these people their princess, or they call them their queen or something like that. And so they just basically just pull on these people's emotions.
Yes.
And then they'll befriend them. And then it's like, well, I couldn't talk today because my uncle, I had to take him to the emergency room. We just didn't have the money to do this or that. And then they start laying out a little bit of a breadcrumb trail. And then the other person on the line, because they got these deep feelings for them, they're like, well, how much is it? And it's like then the scammer, they know that's a tug on the fishing pole. And then and it starts out small, like, well, it's just a couple $100. And even I've had people that I've talked to about this before that's gone through this, and they said the crazy thing is that they would refuse the money in the beginning. And they said it was actually what they learned was from these scammers over there, that was what you call setting the hook. You know, you're basically waiting for people to say the right thing. And they know when they say that and they go, no, 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 I'm not, no, you're not going to do that. It basically concretes it even more, that makes the people want to help them, because it makes them think, well, they got to be honest,
Right.
or they wouldn't be refusing this.
Yes.
And they don't realize they're playing the end game. They're gonna refuse $200 now because they know later down the road they're gonna get $2,000 out of you.
And tens of thousands. Yes. And so, yeah, I've got several different cases that I've already worked that were both men and women that were widowed. So obviously they're emotionally vulnerable. And so then they start, talking to people, through dating apps and through various things. And, they'll send them photos. And I mean, it's amazing. They will get everything that they can get. They will try to get you to people have mortgaged their homes before, retired people that had everything paid off. I mean, I went to serve a subpoena to one of the local banks here in the county. And the guy, I was talking to the guy, we were talking about scams, kind of like you and I are. And he was telling me that one of their bank customers came in. He was a guy probably in his 70s, everything paid for. And so something that's the first cousin to the romantic scams or the investment scams, because a lot of times people, it won't necessarily be romantic, but it just may be friendship. It may be somebody that's lonely, and they, somehow somebody latches on to. Sometimes people will just call their phone and go, oh, sorry, the wrong number. And they'll just try to strike up a conversation with them. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, these people actually strike up a conversation. They're on the phone with them for an hour or two. And then they kind of strike up a friendship, and they'll tell them, well, hey, you can get it. I've got this investment, that's fantastic. It's going to do well for the next 6 months. If you want in this, you better jump in it right now. And so, and what you do is, they'll give you instructions to go and put money in. We've had a victim right here in DeKalb County that's put thousands of dollars, more than one victim, but one that comes to mind right off the bat. They've put thousands of dollars into Bitcoin machines, buy the cards or whatever, but and they will do the same thing for the romantic scams. They play on people's emotions, whether it's romantic or whether it's just friendship. It's a lonely person, or they zeroed in on that person's vulnerability.
Yeah. So they were like, in this thing I was watching and reading, it was talking about there's certain things that they look for when they're scamming. They look for ladies that are a certain age, like above 60, that's either widowed or divorced, retired. So there's certain flags that they're hunting to say, that's the one we're going to go after right there. And so one of the things that they said in that thing is that they're patient, because they're not the only ones they're dealing with. So they got maybe 4 or 5, and they're just like them old call centers that you were talking about a while ago. And they showed a video where this guy rehacked into their account, and like the video showing, man, these people are sitting here just like like some type of executive place. And so they're knowing, and they got it down to a science. They know that if they talk to this person a certain amount of time, that they're going to get, maybe they ain't going to get money, but they're going to get some information.
Yep.
And
yes.
And so like one lady in this thing I was watching, it said that she said, I'll never give money away. And she said, but I've had this friendship with this person for over a year. And she said, and all of a sudden they just disappeared. She said, I like gone. And so anyway, she said, it wasn't long after that. She said, I had a knock on the door, and she said it was the FBI. And the FBI, she said, they actually handcuffed me and was arresting me. And she said, because I was in trouble for like scamming people for money and stuff like that. And she said, I swear I haven't done anything. The guy had taken her information and was basically playing like her. He took her picture, took her information, was acting like her, and she had been embezzling money from all kinds of different places using her information. They were putting her in jail.
They call it grooming.
No,
by the way, getting a little piece of it, like you said, they're playing the long game. they'll get they got your name today and your phone number, and then they'll get some other little piece of information, some other piece, and finally they've got enough to be. And we have a victim here in DeKalb County. I'm sure there's more than one, but did exactly the same thing. That person got completely all their information, got their banking information, got their driver's license number, and they sent them a photo of the driver's license. And so, for all intents and purposes, if say the victim's name is John Smith, I mean, this offender, the scammer, can beat John Smith because he's got all John Smith's information, and so he could commit any crime in John Smith's name if he wants to. Yeah, absolutely. Well, see, they do. That's also a thing that they do in human trafficking too. So we've had some training in human trafficking. That's kind of what they will do there too. Sometimes they will play the long game, on these kids. They'll befriend them. They'll get a little piece of information here, a little piece of information there, and here and there and here and there, until they've got a lot of information. So it's grooming, and it's done both in scamming and in human trafficking.
Well, we had a situation at the ranch one time with a kid that had got on a site, was texting with somebody that we didn't know. And, it was pretty serious stuff. And they didn't understand until I explained to them like this. I said, you have given information out to where we live at, who's in this house. And I said, we don't know who these people are. I said, and then when they started realizing how serious that was, it was like, oh my gosh. And so you just don't ever know. And so, even I had a guy, a friend of mine, precious guy, he had, he's not married, and he's an older guy. And so some lady reached out to him on Facebook that, of course, she just looks like a supermodel, and starts this conversation with him. And she sends him a nude photo. And so she asked for a nude photo. So he sends something back. And as soon as this person gets it, they say, all right, if you don't give me $2,000, I'm going to send this to all your friends list on your Facebook thing. And so his response was, well, I don't have $2,000. And so it's just, and I try to tell guys and everybody, listen, if you weigh 350 bills, if you're 250 pounds and you're 75 years old, you're not Tom Cruise. And if there's a supermodel from the Netherlands that's wearing a bikini that says they want to marry you, it's probably not true. So, but when you're caught up in that, it's almost like, you remember the teenage girls that gets the boyfriend that the parents hate.
Yes.
And the more they say about him, the more it just drives her towards him and stuff. It's almost the same way. So when the family comes in and says, this is crazy, you got to stop this, it's almost like it solidifies it.
Yes.
Because these scammers have already laid the foundation. They don't understand our love.
Yes. Well, gosh, we hear that all the time.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And the complicating factor is a lot of times it's the children they're having this conversation with the parents. And my saying is, and you can use this, by the way, it's not trademarked, but my saying is, and has been for many years, that it's hard to raise your parents.
Yeah.
Because think about it. I mean, they're adults. They've gone through everything, and they're well into older age and whatever. And then now they're being scammed by somebody, but they think they're not, and everybody else is wrong. And like you said, they don't understand our love.
Well, the world around them has changed so well,
Absolutely.
and they don't understand that, especially around here. This is a good place to live and raise a family. People are good folks around here, and a lot of folks around here, the only experience they've ever had with people has been good, positive experiences, and so it's hard for them to comprehend that there's a world out there of people that are just pure evil, that they don't care if you starve to death.
Right.
They'll take your money and don't care.
Yeah. They will, like I said, they will talk you into, we've had one victim that was involved in, like, it was a Bitcoin scam. This one was kind of a call center type thing. I mean, it was they had some kind of an account, whether it be Amazon or whatever the deal was. And, they said, hey, your account's been compromised. And what they told them was, well, your account's been compromised and your identity's been compromised, and they've made these transactions. We're going to be able to get this and get it fixed and everything like that. And then, long story short, they started out by getting them to buy gift cards, and then they got them to send Bitcoin money. And, I looked into it, and I chased, just like I was telling you earlier, I got one little piece of information and one little piece of information, and a little piece, and it rocked on for a good long while. And what I ended up finding out was that, they had, when I got one of the subpoenas, I ended up getting a list of email accounts that, the one thing that was kind of a giveaway is it was something like, um, Google well, it wasn't really Google. It must say Amazon at gmail.com,
Mhm.
but they had one for like, it would start off like, service.security.amazon.com, but they had it for Amazon, they had it for Facebook, they had it, or for Meta, they used to call it Meta, had it for Facebook, Meta, and Instagram. It had it for LifeLock, which is supposed to protect you from scams. And there's 5 or 6 different ones. So I mean, it was obvious that this person was running many, many scams, and this person attempted to get our victim to mortgage her home so that they could get more money. And again, the guy at the bank was telling me about the guy. He put a $80,000 lien on his house to get in on an investment, and so that's not been reported to me yet. I mean,
Well, and that's the thing. It was, I can't remember what that show was. As a pastor, when I know my church folks are facing things, I like to do some research, try to help give them information they need. But, that precious guy I was talking about a while ago, I told him, I said, it would come up on Facebook, like you could see it. I mean, I immediately called him. I said, you need to delete your account right now, and we need to have a talk. And so I asked him. He was telling me what was going on. It was sad. My heart was broke for him, and I just told him. I said, you need to delete this person, be done with them. But I've even seen it like on my Facebook thing. Like I'll get these private messages. I don't know who these people are, and so I don't know if people get mad at me or not. But I don't even take Facebook friend requests no more. So like I've had people say, I sent you a friend request like 3 weeks ago and you hadn't responded. And I'm like, well, I don't respond because I just don't know who's sending me something or not. And it's not like I'm looking on anything I shouldn't, but it's just like they're sending this stuff, and it's just stuff they're wanting you to click on, and they start something, and you can't. Once you do something, it's out there.
Yes.
People thinks it's gone and ain't on the internet. It never goes away.
It doesn't.
And so these people, they just kind of, and I tried to explain to them, I said, you need to be careful. You need to be accountable to these things. And if you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I've heard that if you're going to buy something online, you're better off to use a credit card instead of your debit card, because you can get your money back on credit card.
Correct. Most of the time you can, the debit cards, a lot of times you can do okay, but I've got something open right now on a current business here in DeKalb County where the product that he sells, somebody called and said, hey, I want to buy this product. And they used a credit card, and he put it through his, he's got a credit card processor, and he put it through, it accepted it. And then they'd contracted somebody else to come and pick up the merchandise and deliver it. And they did this multiple times. And then they found out that, whoever was actually the holder, because they used multiple different credit. Oh, I've only got $1,500 on this credit card. I got to put it on multiple credit cards. So then these credit cards, the charges started getting charged back, because the actual credit card holder found out that, hey, these are fraudulent charges. And then, so basically, the business here in DeKalb County right now is left holding the bag. And I've done some subpoenas on this and done some research on it. And, what I found out is this is actually occurring in multiple states. I've got the using the same, the same people have gotten scammed. It's crazy. I mean, this is, the guy got scammed here in DeKalb County, and then that same credit card that was scammed, that was skimmed, I guess is the right way to say it, was also used in Wisconsin, Illinois, Colorado, Georgia, that I know about right now.
Well, and that's the thing, people, you get aggravated about stuff because, like, if you're trying to buy something online or whatever, and then it's asking you for 2 forms of identification, and then you have to do this, and you got to get a code sent to your phone, and then you got to And those things are aggravating, but it's kind of like TSA. I want everybody patted down really good.
Yes.
And that's just a price you have to pay. And it makes it even more complicated with AI coming online now.
Absolutely.
Because you can actually have people that's just automated doing this stuff, and it looks like you're actually texting and talking to somebody and you're not. And like one scam I'd heard about, one lady where they had actually got access to her Wi-Fi. So once you get into that Wi-Fi, any phone that connects to that Wi-Fi and any activity done on that, you pretty much got it's Katie bar the doors.
Yeah, AI is one of the things that has made sometimes it makes it easier to detect if it's a scammer if they're not a native English speaking person. But now they're getting it to where AI, somebody can they can talk into AI and it will actually put it in the right, use the right phraseology.
Yeah.
And it'll put it in it won't necessarily put it in a Southern accent, but it'll put it in a Native American speaking accent, and it makes it very believable. We've also heard of scams where somebody can, they will listen to your voicemail or talk to you on the phone. They'll record that, and AI can mimic that voice, and they'll call grandma and say, "We've got your granddaughter, hostage, $200,000. We're going to kill her." And then here, I'll let you talk to her, and they'll swear that they're talking to their granddaughter. So the AI is going to that's the thing, what you're saying about the dual authentication, to use your credit card or your bank card or whatever, it is good. But it seems to me like that the scammers are one step ahead of everybody. It's like,
Well, sure.
it's like, way back, when my dad was young, they knew how to hotwire a car, and then they started making it to where the key wasn't just there in the dash. They put it on the steering wheel, and whatever. And my dad always said, he said, well, the thieves, it takes them about 5 minutes to figure that out. Well, scamming is about the same for everything they put in place to try to stop scammers. It's almost like the scammers are three steps ahead. They're smart.
And that's a good point too, or we think about this, because we live in a free country, and freedom has a price to it.
Yes.
And that price is responsibility. It's ownership. It's doing what's right. And when people quit doing what's right, then laws have to be made.
Yes.
And we're logged to death.
Absolutely.
And so the freedom that we have is really in jeopardy, because what's going to happen is the only way to manage this stuff is to control the stuff. And the only way you're going to control stuff is to give away power of it. And so the more this stuff happens, to stop it, you're going to have to give away more of your information so that it could all be watched, monitored very closely. And so it's a sad thing that it's the world we're living in, and it's a scary thing, because just from a spiritual aspect, one of the things on one of those shows I had watched, did some research on this. It was this person was trying to scam this person in the States, and they were in like Zimbabwe or somewhere like that. So anyway, they said that they could not get this person in the States to give them the information they wanted. And they said what they do in that time, they go to the witch doctor in the town, and they cast a spell on the person that they're trying to scam. And the guy said, whether he's lying or not, but the guy said about every time we cast a spell on them, we're able to get the information. So there's a demonic element, a part of this that people don't understand, that because here's the thing, Satan he's a schemer. He'll come up with any angle he can. So you take a family who's a loving, caring family, and so you start having a situation where maybe a grandfather is starting to get scammed, and all the money starts coming up out of the account and gone. That was going to be given to grandchildren or land or whatever. And when people start figuring out, their kids start, damn, you got to quit doing this, and they won't quit doing it. It causes a serious problem in the family, a lot of hate and anger and bitterness and hurt feelings. And I've even heard of people like they ain't talked in forever because, it's the same thing like with a guy who gets a girlfriend. He's 72 years old, and this girlfriend, a real girlfriend he's got is 22. They pretty much know what's going on there. And so the kids are like, she's scamming you, Dad. And he's like, no, we're really in love. We got so much in common. And she's just telling him everything he wants to hear.
Yep.
And so it creates a serious family crisis. And I've seen people just that you had never thought hate each other over.
Oh, absolutely. And that is one of the things we hear. We hear it often is, the children are trying to, like I said, it's hard to raise your parents, but the children are trying to get the parents to stop. They can see it, but the parent can't. And that's the opposite of the way that it really should be, in the way that when you got a kid that's 4 or 5, I mean, they're going to go, they want to go do something that is going to mess them up. That's when you try to tell them. But then somewhere along the line, the roles get reversed, and nobody tells you when that happens. As an older person, because I'm obviously getting in that range myself, but as like I say, as an older person, that it is hard to raise your parents because and it's crazy. One of the things you said too, I'm going to go back a little bit in one of these scams. You're talking about the romantic scams too. One of the things I've seen it right here in DeKalb County. Had a case open on it where this older guy, he was a male, was widowed and started a romantic scam with a lady. They got everything that he didn't really have much. And then, what we started seeing, he would get his Social Security check. And for simplicity's sake, let's say he gets $2,000 a month. But what you started seeing in his bank account was $30,000 worth of deposits and $30,000 worth of withdrawals. If you're only getting $2,000 a month, there's not a great reason that $30,000 ought to be going and coming from that account. And then where it was coming from was cash apps. And then it was getting withdrawn in cash. So what's happened is his love interest, they would put money in his account on a cash app that he probably didn't have I mean, he was sharp and everything, but I mean, he was not in a generation that uses cash apps.
Sure.
And so they were depositing money in there, and they were having him go withdraw it in cash and mail it to a specific address. So essentially they were laundering money, and they were using because they've got everything they could get. I mean, all they could get was his Social Security, and they'll take that too. Oh, by the way, but because they're unscrupulous, they will, but. So they were using him, and so I was kind of like, why are they doing this? I mean, what's the value of this? And of course, that was an amount that was low enough that the feds wouldn't get involved in it. And oh, by the way, Alabama criminal code does not include money laundering. There is not a criminal code in Alabama for money laundering. Well, you have to go federal on that. Now there's extortion and forgery and all these others, but theft and whatever. But so I started talking to one of the investigators from another department, and he said, well, what it is that the exchange rate is more favorable, and so they can move the money here and move it offshore when it's worth more. So
when you're dealing with money, people learn to get smart.
Oh, they're like I say, they're steps and steps ahead of.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like when you're talking about these folks that are caught up in this and that's struggling with this, and I've told families before that they've come to me and asked me, so how do we do this? I said, you're going to have to address this and come at this like an addiction.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is.
It's the same thing as an addiction. These people, I mean, I've heard of people that are just honest their whole life. Their kids, someone said, my dad has never lied to me for a day. He's always been honest with me. And all of a sudden they just become the worst liar, being dishonest about things. And it's like an addiction that takes over, and they do the same thing. They always try to cover it up. They're not honest about what they're doing. And it's like they'll, people that would go to bed as soon as the 8:00 at night, all of a sudden they start staying up to 1 a.m. And then they're like driving all over the county, and they're like, they never used to do that. So, and then it's like they grew up in a generation that, I mean, they didn't have all the stuff that we've got now, technology, but all of a sudden they become a Mark Zuckerberg, and they're like, and the family answered, they said, they don't even know about anything. How could they figure out how to do this? I said, because the scammers are telling them how to do this. They've got a thing that says, all right, my love, or my king, go here and do this, go to this website, click this, and they're coaching them through how to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, and there's and so I don't know. It's it's kind of like all new crimes. It takes the state time to catch up to adjust to it. And I was talking to somebody, there's not a whole lot you can do. If you're sitting there watching a parent squander all their money away, there ain't nothing you can really do.
If there's not, and especially, because a lot of times what you have somebody, if a person is competent, and we've had this happen too before. We've had people that they're getting scammed, and see a lot of times what happens, especially with an older person, what'll happen, the way they figure out they're getting scammed is their bank will figure it out, and the bank, once they see certain patterns and transactions and things like that, they will contact them, and if they kind of blow them off, what they will do is they'll contact Department of Human Resources, and Department of Human Resources will contact us. And so what they try to do is determine if that person is competent to make their own decisions. And a lot of times they are. And so we've been out to them before where they're like, if I'm not doing anything illegal, I invite you to leave my property. And the honest truth is they can do that.
Sure.
I mean, if you're an adult, a citizen, you've got civil rights, and if you're competent to make your own financial decisions, if there's not been a conservator or a guardian, issued to you or assigned to you, then if you want to if you want to give away all your life savings to someone that, just like you said, that texts you and call you my love, and they'll send you these photos that is not really them, but it is not illegal to give your money away. It's imprudent, but it's not illegal.
Well, and that's the thing. This isn't just, a lot of times you think, well, this is happening to people that just live down some dirt road somewhere. I know of doctors, lawyers who, I heard of a doctor somewhere. I can't remember where it was at, but like his family had to have him committed. He was basically nearly just homeless. And so it's just, and I had actually called, for a family person in our church, I called Ronnie Osborne. And I said, Ronnie, you deal with this kind of stuff. How prevalent is this? He said, oh my gosh. He said, Paul, he said, this is happening more and more and more. He said, this is starting to get to be a bad thing. And so that's one reason why I want to have you on here and talk to you about it. And it was just kind of accident. You come by the office one day and we were talking, and I asked you what you do now. And I was like, well, that's great. That's something people need to know about, because, money's already hard to get a hold of. You don't need to just let it go easily with anything. And these people over in this documentary I was watching, they was asking this person, they said, why are y'all doing this? These people over in Nigeria, where it was at. And they were like, because Americans are stupid and they deserve it.
Well,
they were just bold, front forward with it and stuff like that. And they said, no, we don't care. So it's terrible what it does, and it's not just one victim. And that's the thing I tell people. I like what a lady said one time to her husband. She said, "Hey, your mama's getting scammed, and you need to do something about this." And he said, "Well, I don't get involved in all that and stuff." And she said, "Well, they're getting her money." And he said, "What do you mean?" She said, They're getting her money. And he said, well, I don't believe so. She said, let me rephrase this. They're getting your money. He goes, oh. And so he started getting a lot upset. And she said, she wasn't really still getting the response like, get up, let's do something about this. She said, you do know that when she's got nothing, she's coming to live here. He goes, let's get to the police department right now. So it's us how you look at it, and that's the thing. It's more serious than people think, and it's you said something a while ago. No man wants to tell other people that he got scammed out of $100,000, so he's not going to say anything about it. And it's just a silent victim's crime, and because it's embarrassing once they figure it out. But here's the crazy thing: I've read of where people have done this, realize it's a scam, and then go back and do it again.
They absolutely have.
It's an addiction.
And I went to a class a few months ago, and one of the things that they were telling about this story where this person had been victimized, and they, went through the whole thing, and then at some point they called the investigator and they said, "Hey, I'm going to send $35,000 to this person if you don't prove to me that this is a scam within 2 hours." And so it's like you say, it's an addiction. And you hit on a couple of different things that I think are very true. Number one, I think evil is behind this, evil and greed. And I don't think Americans are stupid. Um, I think that that's their excuse, maybe to I mean, when you're doing wrong, you're doing wrong. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people go, "Oh, I didn't know. I didn't." I've had, in this line of work, I talked to juveniles. I've talked to, kids 8, 9 years old. "Oh, I didn't know that's wrong." I said, "Don't pretend to me that you don't know right from wrong. You know, we know what right and wrong is, and they know that it's wrong. And Americans are not stupid. What they do is they play on people's vulnerability. And to me, it's one of the most cruel sin that you can do is you could take an old person who's lived a good life and you exploit their vulnerability and take away all their life savings and everything that they and perhaps their spouse that's no longer living have worked for their entire lives. There's not many things that's worse than that. Let's be honest.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, I guess I've gotten a little older. I've enjoyed things like estate sales now, and I could be sitting in one spot and just fall asleep. I guess it's the pawpaw gene that's kicked in. But, one thing I was telling somebody the other day, I said, going to an estate sale is exciting because you might find something that's unique, vintage that you like, man, I remember that when I was a kid and like to get something like that. But I remember the first one I went to, I was just had this awareness. I was just looking, I thought, this is sad because these people, I mean, you take something that's there that today, let's say like a VCR, VCRs came out when I was a kid growing up, and I was just thinking, this person, whoever this stuff belongs to, they probably saved up. They probably did without things to have this, and it's just being sold for nothing.
Yep.
And if it's not sold, it's going to be thrown in the trash. And that's the thing. It's just life really has a way of sometimes bringing things into focus and perspective. And life is not a collection of the things we buy. It's the memories that we have and the things that we leave for the Lord and the things that we invest in other people. And I've said this before from the pulpit. I've been in a lot of deathside beds where people have passed away. Not one has ever said, I wish I'd worked a little bit more. Not one of them.
Absolutely.
There's not one of them that said, I wish I'd have bought more and done that. It's always, I wish I'd spent more time with my wife. I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I'd have served the Lord more. And so life will give us those things where we just kind of go, man, I missed out on what was really the most important thing. And so, Troy, that's why I ain't got no money. I'm just building memories.
But I think you really hit on it, though. I mean, I think, we talked about this in Sunday school, is that I think the busyness of life, that's one thing. And I think we're weak. We're weak human beings. I mean, that's, God's way up here and he's strong and we're weak and we're weak-minded. We think we're not, but that's, you don't keep your eye on, you keep your eye on the ball. It's just the wrong ball.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, and I watched some of these. This one guy, I think his name was Joe Kuhn, Kuhn, and he talks about retirement because, I'm going to retire I plan on retiring in 5 years, but, and he talks about retirement. He's same age as me, but he's been retired for a few years. And, one of the things he said that most people will tell you that's already retired is, I wish I would have retired sooner. Because so it goes kind of like back to what you said. Hardly anybody goes, I wish I'd have made more money, or I wish I'd have bought more boats and four-wheelers and, whatever it happens to be, your hobby, golf clubs, or whatever it happens to be. No, you're right. You're 100% right.
Well, and that's a hard thing too, because, my daddy-in-law, I love him to death. He's a great man. He's a hard worker, but he's worked his whole life, And so, and he grew up pretty poor. I mean, he's told me times where they really struggled. And so, he didn't have anybody in his life that's really giving him anything. So he had to work and get everything he had. And so as he's gotten older, he worked in Chattanooga for years and years and years. And then they just kind of laid everybody off, which he had joked about, I'd really like to retire a little bit. And it was like, we're going to get to, and so he was probably 71 or whatever. And so most people, they're about ready to retire. And so he he thought, well, I'm going to retire. And he realized, I can't do this. And so he decided to get a CDL license. So he got his CDL license, went through CDL school. Man, we were so proud of him. And, you know, I told my wife, I said, you need to get a picture of him as his first day of school. 70 years old. But he's, you know, he was trying to get a job truck driving. And of course, that's all you ever hear is like, all that's in the newspapers is jobs for truck drivers and nurses. Well, he come to find out that you've got to have 2 years of driving experience before a truck company will hire you because it's a new insurance thing.
Wow.
So you can't just go get a truck driving thing anymore. So he had to take some other jobs, and he'd been driving to California for about the past year and a half. And so, but I told him, I said, you know, you need to just quit that. And I said, and he just, you know, he was just really emotional about it. He said, I worked my whole life. That's all I know to do. And so his generation were those that found their identity in work.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think there's a thing wrong with that. I think that's a good thing, you know, to work and enjoy working and stuff like that. But, you know, when you come to a place though, to where you've sacrificed everything, relationships, kids, just to pay for a boat or whatever it is, that's going to be fruit that you're not going to eat one day.
Right.
And it's sad, and I see it all the time with people. And one of the great things about my job as a pastor is I get to see a lot of people. You know, people come to me because they've usually got issues or problems, and so I see things, and I'm like, and it's been able to let me help other people to say, let me give you statistics of what I've seen for the past 20 something years, and so you know you can argue with numbers and stuff sometimes, but when it's testimonies and it's real people, you can't argue with that. That's real stuff. So,
Absolutely.
But anyway, Troy, thanks for coming in, man.
You're very welcome.
I need to have you come back and we talk about some other things and talk about CPA numbers and stuff, right? That's probably your favorite thing to talk about.
You know, it's cool. I mean, a lot of people say exactly the same thing, but you know, I've taken this job, and because of my background, you know, I'm pretty comfortable, you know, digging in and doing research and
you probably enjoy it too.
numbers. I do. Yeah, I do. I mean, more than I thought I would, to be honest with you.
Well, you know, I think that's a great, you know, thing to remind us that, you know, the Lord will use us and our gifts and our talents. And so, man, I'm thankful. I know you love the Lord, and you serve the church, you serve your community. I can't think of a better person to have in that kind of place, and, you know, good Christian person that's got the ability to do that. You know, I got the desire to do a lot of things, but I ain't got the skill to do it.
Same here.
People will say one time, somebody said one time, I need to hire somebody to do this or whatever. I'm like, I'll do it. And they're like, oh, you can do that? I'm like, no, I can't, but I'll try it. You know, like, no thanks. You know, so I mean, you got the skill and ability to do what you're doing. It sounds to me like the Lord's put you there doing that.
Mm-hmm, I think so. And but you're right. And I think we've all got, well, you know, the Bible even tells us, you know, we all each have a talent or talents. So some people have many talents. So, you know, sometimes, you know, my wife and I was watching a video last night. You know, one of my sons we were working on his lawnmower the other day, and I'm not a very good mechanic. I'm not very mechanical. Mm-hmm. And I was watching one, and it was actually a lady doing it. And she took the deck off and was showing how to do all this kind of stuff. And I said, she made that look easy. I guarantee you, if I did that, I would run into so many things that are not even humanly possible for it not to work out. I mean, she had that thing apart and put it back together, put new parts on it in no time flat. And I thought, yeah, I'd have every tool I own out there, and I'd never get it back together.
Driving torch and yeah. Oh goodness. Well, Troy, appreciate what you do. You know, the sheriff's department, you guys, y'all definitely, you know, law enforcement don't get the respect you deserve, especially in the past, you know, 7 years that we've seen all this garbage unfold with stuff like that. So I appreciate what you and Sheriff Weldon and Miss Priscilla and all you guys are doing, and you guys keep up good work. If we can ever do anything for you, you know, don't hesitate to let us know.
Sounds good.
All right, brother.
Thank you. Good deal.